Okay. Why don't we go ahead and get our afternoon group getting ready to roll, so I'll ask my panel to join me up here on stage. But just a few logistical things before we get going. One, a reminder, please, if you have the opportunity, thank our sponsors. Without them, we couldn't have been here and put on an event as nice as this. Secondly, please, if you haven't already had the opportunity, please make it around to some of the partner booths of these organizations that are making an incredible impact on our state. And lastly, I don't know if you saw it in the program, but at 4:30 at the close of today, we will be having stadium tours. So if anybody is interested in touring the stadium and seeing more than just this room and what goes on within Mercedes-Benz Stadium, please definitely plan on sticking around for that. That will be an event you will not want to miss. So, gentlemen, please, if you would join me. Wherever you'd like. Just these three, I think, would be good. Great. Here. Got it. Good. Okay, I don't know if when you go to a meeting or a conference and you have a session that is getting ready to start, you look at the title of the session and say, well, where'd they come up with that title? So if you look at the title of the session for the group we're getting ready to start, it's called Business. Mankind Was My Business. Can anybody remember where that line came from? Very good, Jamie. A Christmas Carol. So I don't know if everybody in here remembers. It's only appropriate this time of year to talk about Ebenezer Scrooge. But in A Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge had gone up to his room and was sitting down to have his dinner when all of a sudden he started hearing the clanging and all these spooky sounds coming on, and then appeared Jacob Marley, his deceased former business partner. And the whole intention that Jacob Marley had was to begin the adventure Scrooge was about to undertake with the three ghosts, and he was giving him a little precursor of what he was about to go through. And he began to relate it to some of the issues and problems he had had when he was alive, and some of the regrets that he had had that he was attempting to prevent Ebenezer Scrooge from going through. And at that point, Scrooge looked at him and he said, "But you were always a good man of business, Jacob." And that's when Marley looked at him and said, "Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business." And that really begins to paint a picture of what we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about. We're shifting, if you think about the success sequence, we're shifting off of education and on to work. And so the next two panels, both this one and the one following, are going to talk a lot about employment and work. And more specifically, as we jump into this group, if you look at the subtitle, How Some Georgia Companies Are Bringing Solutions and Hope to Disadvantaged Communities. So it goes back to what Marley was talking about, is work is more than just the bottom line. Work is more than just the 8 to 5, 9 to 5. In a lot of our cases, 6:30 to 7:30, you know, we all tend to look at it a little differently, but it's more than that. It's what we give back. And I think that's one of the things to me that's most exciting about this panel. You can see in the booklet their bios. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to pull together a panel of three more distinguished gentlemen in the state of Georgia. When you look at their accomplishments, when you look at what they are engaged and involved in, it's incredibly impressive. But the thing that is, in my mind, even more impressive is the men that they are and the hearts that they have for both our state and the people within our state. So that's what I'm probably most excited about, is to have the opportunity to spend some time and talk with them. So let me just do a quick introduction, and then I will jump into questions. First, Rodney Bullard from CHICK-FIL-A. Rodney is the Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility, but also the Executive Director of the CHICK-FIL-A Foundation. Next is Greg Beatles. Greg is the Chief Operating Officer of AMB Sports and Entertainment. And last, Chris Clark. Chris is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. So I think we've got the waterfront covered pretty nicely. But since we are here in this incredible stadium, in this beautiful facility, I think it's only appropriate that we start off our first question with Greg. And Greg, when you think about the planning when this whole concept started way back several years ago, there was a lot of intentionality put into this site and this location of thinking about where it was located, the community, and partnering with the community. Can you talk a little bit about the thinking about that at the very beginning, and then how throughout this process you have worked with the community to make this dream come true?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, and welcome everyone to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Hope you enjoy the day today. I heard that it's a first visit for a lot of the folks here, so glad that you're here, and hope you'll come back for some of our other events. Bill, there was a lot of intentionality, real conscious efforts that went on. I think really we have to start at the beginning. The big picture philosophy that Arthur Blank, our owner and chairman, has is not really an ownership model of our professional sports teams here or of the stadium. It's more of a stewardship model, and he's said that publicly from day one. The first press conference he had as owner of the Atlanta Falcons, that's what he said. So the city of Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, the state of Georgia really owns the Falcons. And so he's trying to steward that, and he certainly fosters that approach to us. So that was sort of the big picture start. It was very intentional for us to be downtown. Arthur told us, Rich McKay, my boss, and I and others, that we're going to build this stadium downtown. So when we were out negotiating, he didn't give us a lot of leverage, about, hey, we're going to go off here or go off there. And so, we had to kind of work within that framework. He's a downtown person. He wanted to be here. And his foundation, Arthur and his foundation, have been involved down here in the neighborhood in the West Side area for years and years before we ever came down and built the stadium. And so they've been very active. Spend a lot of money, but also just a lot of heart and soul and effort in the community as well. So all of that really set the stage for what the foundation and all of our businesses have done and are doing in the West Side.
Can you maybe drill down just a little bit and talk about some specific things that you've done directly with the community as the stadium was being built and their engagement and involvement in that process?
Sure. Early on, we wanted to do a lot of listening. As I said, Arthur's organization was not a stranger to the neighborhood. And so Rich, Arthur, others at the foundation spent a lot of time at the NPU meetings. We heard a lot about what was going on with the Georgia Dome, and a lot of the residents here felt like the Dome was sort of a wall to the rest of downtown. We heard about flooding issues that happened during construction of the Georgia Dome. And one of our core values is to listen and respond. So we listened to both those things and a lot of other things and responded. And if you've had a chance to see our Home Depot backyard, which is where the Georgia Dome used to be, that's something that's a direct response to what we heard. And so instead of building just 12 or 13 acres of asphalt parking lot, for example, like you see around a lot of stadiums. Instead, we built a grass park. And so today and other days when there's not any sporting event going on, any large event going on here, it's open to the public. And so our foundation has a group that programs that space for the community, for the neighborhood. We have flag football, we have youth soccer practices there during the week. And then it's a great tailgating space for us for sporting events. So it's also a natural connection up to downtown. We put in escalators, we have elevators, so it's easy for folks to go back and forth from the west side to there, so just one example. We get into a little bit later if you want, but the biggest thing I think is our West Side Works program that the foundation set up and started to really give residents in the West Side an opportunity to train for a job, be able to keep a job, and then in the future, get a even better job, and that's been very successful.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Let's go a little more macro. Chris, I'd like to maybe come over to you, and from heading up things from a Georgia Chamber standpoint, you have a very unique opportunity to see business at work across the entire state. And, obviously over the last decade, we came out of a pretty rough recessionary period. How would you talk about the business climate now, the economy, and what you're seeing from your members and businesses across the state?
Sure. Well, first, Bill, thanks to you and Randy for having me today, and thank you for putting on this event. This is a great discussion to have. So yeah, Georgia did suffer coming out of the last recession. Things have really turned around as a state. I'll give you just a few statistics here. Just from 2018 alone, you have 14% more healthcare companies moving to Georgia. You have 83% increase in the number of data center companies moving to Georgia, 153% increase in the number of technology companies, and 233% increase in the number of headquarter companies that have all located in Georgia this year. And I'll tell you, Governor Deal's going out with a bang. He's announcing projects left and right over the next few weeks. But despite that incredible economic growth, we have not seen the rebound in rural Georgia. And I don't know how many folks are here. Anybody here from rural Georgia besides me? Just a few. Miss Amy Carter, our Deputy Commissioner for rural Georgia. Thank you, Amy, for being here. It's a different story to tell there. We're going to add 1.5 million people to the state of Georgia in the next 11 years. But during that same time, I'll have 74 rural Georgia counties that will lose population. We're going to have 1.4 million job openings in Georgia over the next 7 to 8 years. But right now, the prediction is that 84 counties in Georgia, those same rural counties, will actually lose jobs. And so we've always talked about two Georgias. You really see it crystal clear right now. And not to say that there aren't good, opportunities out there, and there aren't. We just had an announcement in Thomasville last week. A few weeks ago, 500 jobs in Bainbridge. But we got much further to go in those rural communities. And so while we're happy in Atlanta and the growth is great, and the growth is great on the coast, you see continued growth up in North Georgia, and the area around Atlanta continues to expand. We've got issues out there, and we're going to end up as a state that has donor communities like the metro area, and you're going to be sending your tax dollars to those rural communities if we don't find different solutions to help those communities out there. So good news, but cautionary, and a lot more work to be done.
Have you seen any specific companies doing things to attempt to address some of the rural challenges, or working with people to try and kind of bring them up to speed from a workplace perspective?
So there's a lot of great examples out there, and I mean, you've got two of the best companies in the state right here that are doing that work here. Rodney's helping all over the state as well. And you've got small companies doing their part. You've got communities or companies like Dot Foods down in Vidalia who are opening their own healthcare clinic in the plant, not just for their employees, but their employees' families and anybody that relate to those folks. You've got JCB in Savannah that's developing their own apprenticeship program. So yeah, companies are doing a lot of good work. I'll give credit to the members of the General Assembly that are here, particularly the House members. Speaker Ralston has really made a focus on rural Georgia for the last couple of years. Last year, the General Assembly passed 16 bills and funding measures, all to help rural Georgia. Now, none of those are silver bullets. it's more like a silver buckshot. We just keep shooting at it. We need to talk about incentives for rural communities. We need to think differently about how we incentivize job creation. But the number one issue, and I know we're going to come back to this, the number one issue everywhere I go, every company that I talk to, every community that I'm in, is the talent equation. Where's the talent? Are they prepared? Can we recruit them back home? Because if you don't have millennials, if you don't have a pipeline of Zoomers, and if you haven't started talking about the alphas yet, add that one to your mix out there, then that company's going to leave if they can't find that pipeline of workers. And I know we want to talk more about that, but those are the big issues.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Rodney, Chick-fil-A, I think to me is just not only known for great food, but obviously known for the corporate culture and philosophy of really investing in the communities that you serve. What drives that? And how do you maintain that as you look at the growth that you've had both from a, let's just say inside the city as well as out into the rural communities?
So thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always good to be here when it's not a Georgia game. Hurts my heart.
Sorry, I couldn't help with that one.
So well. It's also a pleasure to be on the panel with this esteemed group. Chick-fil-A, before I get to your question, we've done a lot with the Blank Foundation. We're very honored to be in the same mention with the Blank Foundation. We particularly have a program that is in partnership with the Blank Foundation, actually was gifted to the Blank Foundation, called the Ambassadors Program. So if you come here on a Sunday and you're participating in a Falcons game and you're here at the Dome, there are young people who are from the community, who are helping you and assisting you, and they're your Sherpas there. And so that's deliberate. And so that they can interact with you, and they also can interact with and learn from themselves. And Arthur has been wonderful and truly loves that program, from what I understand. So we appreciate the opportunity to do work here. And Chris is amazing throughout the state. And so people ask, what's our competitive advantage at Chick-fil-A? And there are a host of things we could talk about, but I think one of them critically is our culture. And it's a culture of giving back. Our corporate purpose actually says nothing about selling waffle fries or chicken sandwiches or things of that nature. It says that our corporate purpose is to be a good and faithful steward of all that's been entrusted to us and have a positive influence on everyone who comes in contact with Chick-fil-A. And that pervades. That pervades in the work that we do. It pervades in the manner in which we see philanthropy and giving back and corporate social responsibility. And that equates for us into leadership, that leadership is influence. And what are the hard problems that we're trying to solve throughout?
Great. How do you push that culture through the company, right? I mean, I think a lot of people or a lot of companies have tremendous value statements, tremendous mission statements, have them up on the wall, and employees walk by. Sometimes they look at them, most times they walk past. But it takes a concerted effort to really get that from top to bottom within the organization, that not only understanding of the culture, but living it out on a daily basis. How do you go about making sure that that's truly in place?
You know, at Chick-fil-A, we get a chance to live out the corporate purpose, and because we see the family do it. We see Dan Cathy do it. We see if Dan were here today and he saw a piece of paper on the floor, he would pick that piece of paper up, and he's the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. And so you'll see that service enacted out in everything that we do. And we hire for it. And at some point, culture always predominates. There is a business saying that you can have all the strategy in the world, but culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so if you are true to your strategy, that really does pervade.
Right. Thank you. Rodney, of one of your many hats, your foundation hat, you talked a little bit about the Ambassadors Program that goes on. You clearly have a lot of organizations that undoubtedly are approaching you with great ideas and things that they believe will have an impact within either the community or business or whatever the case may be. How do you go about filtering through all those great ideas to really land on things that you think are going to make a difference?
I think first you have to be very clear about your North Star, your strategy, your why. And our why is the reason why we're on this panel. Our why is because we understand that in every community, urban communities, rural communities, communities in Georgia, communities outside of the state, the issue is the issue of economic divide and economic mobility. And we also very much understand that if you look to communities of poverty and you look to communities of wealth, the communities of poverty typically have systemic issues of crime, systemic issues of healthcare, and systemic issues of education. And I've never seen a community of wealth have any of those issues. And so at the end of the day, we've come to the conclusion that we are putting Band-Aids on everything else unless we solve an issue of resource, and unless we solve an issue of workforce, unless we solve an issue of opportunity. And so we are going to continue to have these problems, and they will persist.
Great, thank you. At the beginning, when I welcomed everyone, I talked a little bit that my role at GCO is Vice President of Workforce Solutions, and our focus is primarily on an initiative that we call Hiring Well, Doing Good. And that initiative is focused on partnering with communities and the businesses and nonprofit organizations and leaders within that community to do what we can to put an infrastructure in place to reach those who are chronically unemployed or underemployed. And a lot of the focus on hiring well, doing good is in the name of that. You know, hiring well isn't just going out and just finding anyone to hire. It's hiring the right people. And in our initiative, our focus is on identifying strengths and weaknesses of folks and working with them, partnering with them to train them up so that they will be identified as a good potential employee. And the doing good is not only getting an employee in, but having one who is going to have a long-term positive impact to the business, both in their productivity, but also in the bottom line. And Greg, when you think about the work that you all have done within the community, and especially a lot of the West Side Works activity and the number of folks that you have engaged both here at the stadium and beyond, how do you balance that of giving back to the community as well as understanding the impact to the bottom line and how, you know, they both really have to work to make it work overall?
Sure. You know, the West Side Works program, which is a training program that the foundation started and has a lot of support from other people in the city, over the last few years has trained about 650 residents of the West Side for construction type jobs. We have a culinary academy that's performed in tandem with our food and beverage service here, Levy, that really invest in that along with us, childcare training, things like that. And you know, those folks have shown an initiative. They want to get training. They want to better themselves. They want to better their families. And they go through several weeks of training and programming. And over 80% of them have, after they've received jobs, all of them have earned jobs. They've stayed in those positions for well beyond a year, over 80% of them. So they're keeping their jobs. They're working hard. They're becoming you know, really contributing to their family's success and our city's success and our neighborhood down here. So, you know, part of that we look at, it's not just a training program. We send them out and we're done with them. So those folks have earned almost $20 million in wages over the last few years after they've graduated. We had about 500 that came and worked on the stadium project. And we have hundreds that still work here today in our culinary program and other things here in the stadium and have gone out other places as well and done great jobs. So, you know, part of the bottom line return is we have in the 300 level, our largest concession stand is run by both graduates and students that are in the West Side Works program. It's called West Nest. If you go up on 300, they have an awesome chicken sandwich, number 2 only, we know who.
On Sundays.
That's right. But it's one of our best concession stands. You know, so that's not our purpose in doing this is to make money. But those folks have jobs. They're contributing. We got a lot of people that come through the stadium, and they help us to manage those folks. And so there's a balance in both for sure.
Great. Rodney, I know Chick-fil-A has also made a very concerted effort on the west side as well. Can you maybe speak a little bit to what you've seen since you all have been as engaged as you have in the west side as far as the changes that have been happening in the community?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Atlanta and was accustomed to going to the Falcons games when it was the Georgia Dome, and really had no full awareness of the neighborhoods across the street. I was kind of familiar, I knew some of the churches, et cetera, but I didn't have a full awareness, and so many of us are in that boat that we didn't fully understand what was going on and what wasn't going on. And so once Chick-fil-A has become fully aware, which has happened probably about 6 or 7 years ago, since then we've invested over $40 million, or pledged over $40 million to various organizations, and still doing that. And you can see a palpable difference physically with all the projects that are going on and all the things and all the movement from Cook Park to the YMCA to a host of efforts to the Chick-fil-A restaurant that's right there on MLK that I hope you patron. Quincy Springs is a wonderful operator there and extremely committed to this community. And so you can see that, but you also can go inside Hollis STEM Academy and you can see the difference in education and the quality of opportunity that these kids, and even more so, you can see that they're as capable as any kid and any child any place else. And so Hollis is particularly focused around STEAM, and so you see robotics going on, and you see math, and you see the arts, and all of that being present right there in that school. So there is a lot of hope that is on the west side, but I don't want to dissuade anyone. We still have a long way to go. And so one of the things that we're very proud of is we're in partnership with the Arthur M. Blank Group. On March 21st, right behind us, we're going to have an event. A benefit is what we're calling it, and 2,000 people will be able to come in and be able to break bread together, but also bring the city together, not just the west side, but also the west side, the north side, the east side, and the south side. And every dollar raised, or the majority of the dollars raised, will go towards benefiting 15 different organizations on the west side of Atlanta. West Side Works being one of them, Grove Park, West Side Future Fund, the Atlanta Police Foundation, at Promise Center, and the City of Refuge are 5 large organizations that are being supported. So we're excited about that opportunity. It will be a big event. I hope that you all show back up on the field, and I hope you buy a ticket because the dollars will go towards those organizations.
What was that date again?
So March 21st, 2001. It's called the Beloved Benefit. The notion of the beloved community is a notion that Dr. King popularized in the 1960s. And the whole notion is that in our community, we can't let someone else fall down. It is all our community. We are all one. And therefore, we have to be mindful and we have to be cognizant of our brothers and our sisters. And so this is really, hopefully, the embodiment of that. And that Atlanta is the beloved city, the beloved community.
Fantastic, thank you. Chris, as we were talking about earlier, you do have a very unique position and having a lot of visibility into what's going on around the state. And I know you see companies that are doing things to reach the chronically unemployed and those who are underprivileged and having a difficult time. Can you share with us maybe some of the stories or innovative things that you have seen around the state that have been going on?
Well, I'll tell you a story. I think you've heard it before, Bill, but I think it kind of encapsulates one of the issues that's out there. In the last 17 months, I've done, I think, 157 speeches or facilitations with communities and business leaders around the state, talking about how they move people from poverty to prosperity, how they're overlooking a workforce. They're complaining about not having a workforce, and they're overlooking a workforce that's existing in their community. So what are the strategies to move them back in and then back into the workforce? And then what are the strategies to help prepare that next generation as well? I had one plant manager come up to me down in Middle Georgia, and he said, let me tell you part of the problem is that it's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to do the right thing. It's that the state and the federal government aren't being good partners with us. And I said, well, explain it to me. He says, we have a single mom who's been working with us for about 10 years. She works on the plant floor. She's our best employee. So this was a month maybe before we talked. He said, on a Friday, we called her and said, we want to promote you. She's so excited. She's worked for this, and it was, $4 or $5 an hour of a promotion. It was move off the floor up into the office, right? This was dream come true. She's so excited. She came back on Monday and said, I can't take the job. What do you mean? Help me understand that. And she says, well, she got support, government support for child care. And when she did the math over the weekend, she was going to move up just enough that she wouldn't be able to get that support anymore. Now, how in the world, what are we doing when we're incentivizing people not to take the opportunities when they're putting that time in? And so that's a conversation. I know your group is working on that, and I'm excited to work with Buzz on what that might look like. But those are the kind of things, I mean, if businesses want to do the right thing and government's getting in the way and people are doing their part, I think those are big issues. And so I think we have that discussion that goes on. And then we are seeing, I'll give you one example of a really innovative program. So one of the statistics that I use is third grade reading. It is an ugly statistic to hold up to a community when some of our communities, less than 20% of their kids are reading at grade level at third grade. Y'all all know the statistics. You use that for your corrections numbers and your number of prison beds. So we tell every community I go in, here's your number. You want to make a difference in this community over the next 20 years, fix this number. We had that conversation a year ago up in Bartow County. And after it was over, the head of the Bartow Baptist Association came up to me and said, I want to tell you what we're doing. He says, we have 20 churches working with the business community. We've recognized this issue, and we're going to partner together, and we're going to go from 30% reading level to 60% in 5 years. Now, that's innovation. That's not government fixing the problem. That's business working with the nonprofit sector saying we're going to make a difference in our community. We're trying to help other communities understand how to engage the faith community to address issues like opioid epidemic, whatever those things might be. So there are great examples out there, but I think we also have to think about how do we, listen, at the end of the day, these two businesses is a bottom line, right? You got to take care of your employees, you got to take care of the shareholders, whoever the ownership group is. And so some businesses want to do good things like health care. We've got some companies like Aflac building a child care facility for their employees on site. Are there things that we can do to incentivize those more companies to do that? When there's not as much money out there, how do we partner? How do we, maybe it's a state incentive, whatever it is, how do we help companies do what they want to do? Because at the end of the day, they know if we take care of our employees, they're going to take care of us and we're going to grow and we're going to prosper. And if we don't offer good benefits, then they're going to go somewhere else. And so every business in Georgia is really aware. We had a great meeting in Valdosta not long ago, Amy. I can't remember if you were in the room or not, but we had 4 manufacturers who all complained about not having the talent locally. And 3 of them said, well, you know, we're all raising our entry-level rates. We're raising our salaries. The 4th guy said, well, that explains why I keep losing people and I can't keep them here anymore. But this idea of cheap labor, that day is gone. And we are seeing businesses realize now we got to pay more to keep the talent, get the talent, and it's a much more competitive market, even in those rural communities. It's not just happening in Atlanta.
Right. Thank you. One of the aspects of the Hiring Well, Doing Good initiative that we are looking at is not just getting people back to work or into work. I think that's critical and that's important, but also a very important element of it as well is to focus on providing them the skills to continue to grow within the companies that they are at. And so we get into the conversation about wages, and we're not going to go down, my goal isn't to go down a path about wages and things of that nature, but I think one of the challenges that we face is it's not just enough to have someone getting a job. It really is equipping them with the skills to progress throughout an organization so that they can continue to earn the wages that are going to be necessary for them to be able to thrive. I'll kind of throw this out in general and ask maybe all of you to respond to this. What do you see, either Chris, on your part, companies doing, or either from a CHICK-FIL-A or from within the sporting world, what do you see happening in regards to not just getting people into work, but the things that either you are doing or companies are doing to help them advance and better themselves to be able to provide for their families and then put themselves in a position to give back as well?
Well, a couple of general thoughts here. One is, if we're really going to tackle this issue and helping people long-term continue to improve their skills, we're going to have to change how we do education in Georgia. Right now, our education system is not built for lifelong learning. Skills are changing so quickly every single day. Folks need more. I mean, listen, in our lifetime, human knowledge will double every 12 hours. So how in the world do you keep up with your skill sets at work if the last education that you really had or the last training you had was 20 years ago when you left technical college or college? But I don't believe technical colleges, I don't believe universities are necessarily built to facilitate that lifelong learning process. Listen, for big businesses, they can come in and build their own training center. They can do lots of that work. That's great. But for the majority, the overwhelming majority, the 90% of Georgia companies that are small that maybe can't even afford to have an HR manager, there's another partnership that has to happen in order for them to continue to develop those skill sets. And they might not even know what those skill sets are, right? It might be robotics, might be something else. And so we have to have a fundamental, and I think that's the biggest challenge for Governor-elect Kemp and the new General Assembly, is how we deliver lifelong education in Georgia, and what are the skills that we're providing? Because it's not just reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's a whole new realm that we're going to need for an individual to be competitive. We talk a lot about businesses being competitive. We got to start talking more about how you make an individual competitive long term, because that's what businesses are looking for. I'll stop with this. When I started in economic development 2 decades ago, I was told, you're basically a real estate agent. You know, it's all about location, location, location. Put in some water and sewer and some dark fiber and a big empty plot of land and build a pad and companies will come. That's not the companies we're recruiting today to Georgia. Amy will tell you, it's all about talent, talent, talent. Where can I go that I have a lifeline, a long-term pipeline of talent? That's why Mercedes moved here from New Jersey. That's why State Farm is hiring 18,000 people at their campus. That's why all these 233% increase in headquarters companies are coming here, because we're going to have a 23% increase in millennials in Atlanta over the next 10 years. And so that's what we have to change, that dialogue. We have to change the partnership between government, educators, and the private sector.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. The question, and I'll get to it from a corporate perspective, but I fully agree that we have to take care of the individual development. If you think about it, I was just out in Silicon Valley about a month ago. If you think about the jobs that we currently are giving and teaching people, long-haul truck driver, where in 10 years we will likely have autonomous vehicles, and that's a right place for autonomous vehicles, is the long-haul trucking industry. You think about, I want to create more people in the building industry. Well, we're 3D printing houses right now. Small scale, but at some point we'll do that on a large scale. And so if your skills are such that we don't need them anymore, then that's really not what we should be developing people into. And we need to give people the opportunities for tomorrow's jobs that may not have been created. And so when we think about that from a Chick-fil-A perspective, obviously the majority of our workforce really is in a restaurant. And so many of our employees, really our operators' employees, not Chick-fil-A corporate employees. We're relatively small from an employee base corporately. But operators, we need to make sure that they have the ability to receive an education. So we created a scholarship program that is extremely robust. And so you can receive up to $10,000. You can apply for it 4 times. And then 12 to 13 children throughout the country will get a $25,000 scholarship. We also have fellowship programs where we bring cohorts of 80 team members in so that they learn and they receive the skills so that they can continue to go out and seek additional skills. And that's leadership lessons, but it's also education and it's also exposure. And so there are plenty of ways in which we do it, and it's a matter of incentivizing them to move to the next level. We don't want necessarily our hourly employees to always be hourly employees. We want them to seek something at that next level. So wherever that level is, help them get to the next level. We want them to be operators one day. And so we have a leadership development program where we take students, many of them former team members, and we help pipeline them into being owners of a Chick-fil-A restaurant. So all very important to incentivize and to encourage people to stay with you.
I would just add one of the things that we've tried to focus on here is if we've hired someone, we've obviously got to keep them up to date on technical skills. So if they drive heavy equipment around here or they work in the kitchen, We've got to give them those on-the-job skill training. We've got to do safety training, all the different certifications that they have to do. But a real emphasis that we put on from the beginning was to also include soft skills and to inculcate our culture through meetings. So we developed a program called Welcome Home Training that all of our full-time associates, from our CEO all the way down, all of our part-time hourly associates, we continue to do this after they've been hired, goes through training where they learn management skills. How do I deal with conflict? Try to see things from other people's sides. So these are skills that folks that typically may not get that type of education can interact with professionals, teachers that have done this and really help them. And you know, it's been great for us because we have a lot of events going on here and we work our people really hard. But we've seen just a tremendous retention rate in an industry where, for example, one of the other recent stadiums that opened a couple years ago in the NFL, after their first 6 months, they had about 75% turnover in all of their hourly workers. We've retained well above 80%, probably 90% of our folks have stayed and come back. We've got people that are professionals out somewhere else but want to come and work because they've heard what a great team of all these folks that we have. Ranked number one in the NFL and the MLS are people by the fans. So when you come in, you know, just like Chick-fil-A is known for my pleasure, we're really getting known for our people and how they treat everyone and how they help, both the people that do food service, right now ranked number one in both of those leagues out of all of the teams combined together, and then also our people that take your tickets and security and everything else. And that's part of the investment that Arthur and others saw that we need to make in people beyond just on-the-job type skills.
Great, thank you. I just had a question that came up from outside, and it was going down a line of thought I wanted to pursue as well. As part of our hiring well, doing good, one of the first elements we look at is doing an assessment on an individual to begin to understand, do they have any immediate barriers? In other words, are there things that are immediately going to be either a red flag, yellow flag issue, or something that would prevent them from coming into the workforce? It could be something like childcare or housing, but it also could be something that maybe is a little bit more significant in that they have a criminal record. And how do you think about, how do you, either Chris, from your perspective, see companies, or how do you see organizations dealing with that issue? Randy, you know, kicked off this morning talking about the number of people in the state of Georgia that have been impacted that way. And so as we think about reaching out to the chronically unemployed or underemployed, undoubtedly we will run into more and more of that as some form of a barrier. So one, do you see that? And two, how do you factor that in as you go through the hiring process?
So I'll just say the companies that we talk to are much more open to having those discussions and hiring those folks right now than they were even 3 or 4 years ago. And I give a lot of credit to Governor Deal, who's made criminal justice reform a priority. I mean, he made job creation and criminal justice reform. That's two pretty good things that we need in Georgia. You're also seeing other states now have these same discussions about how you move it back. I hope the federal government moves forward with their criminal justice reform. I think it's stalled out right now. I think your congressmen and women need to hear from you that that's important to have that. But I do think you have to have, you know, some protections, and you have to realize that some of those folks coming out of the system, there are sensitive jobs that it can be difficult for them. And we might not be able to move them into those jobs. But there are more jobs open right now in the southeastern United States than there are people that are unemployed times 2. And so this idea of, let me think differently about who I'm going to hire and bring in here is real, particularly in the manufacturing sector, particularly in logistics right now. Those guys are open and they're willing to have those discussions and have a different dialogue.
A simple example, Bill, is, again, the West Side Works program that the foundation and others work on. Those several hundred people I mentioned before that have earned, you know, been very successful after they come out, earned $20 million in wages, 80% of them had a criminal record. 80% of them. And again, they've shown the initiative to get involved. The program has been made available to them where they can better themselves and move on, and they've done that. So giving people a chance is the big key.
3 quick thoughts. Before I came to Chick-fil-A, I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, federal prosecutor. One of the reasons why I came to Chick-fil-A was because we had created a program to fight recidivism, where we saw that within 3 years, particularly in neighborhoods like the neighborhood across the street, people were back in prison within 3 years. And so that recidivism was a serious problem and continues to be a problem. And workforce opportunity was one of the reasons why they were back in jail. It's because they couldn't find an opportunity. And so we have been mindful, particularly at the store here on MLK near the stadium, about hiring. But I will say this, we've been mindful, we don't ever want to stigmatize. We don't ever want that person to somehow be different than another employee. And I also will say this, it's easy to say, but it's in many cases, you have to give that person even more skills. And job development and skill development is very important on the front end, or else they will fail. And the failure rate, we don't often talk about how many come into the pipeline. We talk about how many come out. We don't talk about how many come into the pipeline and fail because we haven't given them adequate skills. And I saw, when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, we had a sign-in sheet for those who we were helping. And so we would go to the state and get those who were on probation, and we had a sign-in sheet. And so many of those we had attending the session would walk past the sign-in sheet. And at some point, I was upset. And I said, well, why aren't you all signing in? And I realized many of them could not read or write properly and do that in public and feel confident about that. And so we do have to make sure that we give people the skills within prison, which Governor Deal has done a wonderful job of, and I know Chris is familiar with. And so that's part of the equation.
Great. Kind of maybe to tag on to what Rodney just indicated, a question came in that said the face of manufacturing is changing regarding U.S.-born versus non-U.S.-born. How do employers continue to assist with providing development, economic security, and greater engagement with a growing immigrant workforce?
Well, I'll just say, I mean, listen, within 10 years, Georgia's going to become a majority minority state. In Atlanta alone, over the next 20 years, we'll have 1 million more Hispanics than we have today. The workforce is changing in every community in Georgia. Unfortunately, I'll say, particularly for many of those immigrant communities, many of those folks that are here legally or illegally, that are in the workforce, they're left out of the discussions that we're having. They're not invited to the table. I'm real proud. We just signed an agreement. The Georgia Hispanic Chambers have become our partner. They're moving our office in 2 weeks because we both see the changing state and how do we work on policy issues together. How do we lobby together? How do we make a difference long term? And how do we educate folks? One of the things that we want to do is to set up Hispanic business councils all over the state of Georgia, working with their local chambers so that they're part of that business community. And so I think a lot of it is going to take really a heavy lift and an outreach from folks in this room, business leaders across the state, local leaders, to say, you know what, you're welcome. We want you. We care about you. We want to have a different discussion. And that's difficult. It's particularly difficult in a political environment at the Capitol where you're trying to score points at the national level. We got to build a wall, or I got to do this, or I got to do that. That doesn't help. That doesn't facilitate. And in many cases, we see it makes folks locally say, you know what, I'm better just to be in the shadows over here instead of coming out and having a discussion. And so that's part of our effort, part of our priority as we move into the next several years is to help those local community groups, our organizations, and others realize that diversity is positive, bring people into the picture, and have a different discussion.
Great, thanks. Chris, you had alluded in some of your opening comments regarding some of the challenges that we're seeing from rural Georgia. And this is a great question from the audience. Is the social environment and political leanings of Georgia's rural communities truly conducive to the recruitment of millennials who represent a diversity of thought, culture, et cetera? Is that becoming a barrier?
Thanks, whoever wrote that one.
Yeah, exactly.
No, listen, I think you have some incredible communities in rural Georgia who understand that if they can improve themselves and be a place where people want to live, work, play, and pray, millennials will come there. You see what Albany is doing downtown right now. You see what Thomasville is doing downtown. You see some of the other initiatives. What I'm encouraging every community in Georgia to do is to not just have a strategy about how you recruit companies, but how you recruit and keep people. And one of the things I have to say that really doesn't go over well is if everyone making a decision in your community is an old white guy like me, you're sending the wrong message. That's not going to work. You have to reach out. You have to have a different dialogue than you have. Young people have to be at the table. But what we are seeing for the first time in, I guess, probably the last 10 years, millennials are moving back home. They are moving to the suburbs. They're moving to rural communities. One, because they want good schools and they want their parents to take care of the kids so they can go out at night. And that's fine. But if communities want to be attractive to those young men and women, those millennials, they do have to change their local culture. They're not going to go anywhere. They're the post-race generation. If they go to a community that has a racial history, where race is on the front page of the paper, where people are excluded from being part of the discussion, they're not going to go there. That's very difficult for some of my 70-year-old elected leaders in some communities out there to understand. That the world is changing. It's not about them anymore. They might never in their life go to a brew pub. But by gosh, if they want a young generation there, they probably need to have a brew pub or something for people to do at night instead of going home to watch Netflix. And so it's a whole different discussion that they have to have. But I do think, I'll end with this, that if you look at what developers are building in Atlanta, they're building live, work, play, pray communities. They're replicating a model of traditional downtown rural communities. If rural communities can do that, they will have something attractive to offer, and they will be able to be a place where millennials and Zoomers want to build their families.
Great, thank you. Another question came in. It said, expand on the hiring well, doing good assessments. Some brilliant people are bad standardized test takers, which is, I think a great point. When we're incorporating the assessment phase within hiring well, doing good, and I'd be curious to our panel as well as you think about assessing people that are coming into your organizations, this is not an aptitude assessment. This is really assessment to understand strengths and weaknesses and areas that we can assist them in, soft skills and skills that they would need to be successful within an organization. So interpersonal skills, conflict resolution, leadership skills, things of that nature, as opposed to someone coming in to take a test that's, either IQ based or, graded or things of that nature. So that really is the focus. Can you all maybe speak to, as you think about people coming into your organization, and a lot of people may not be good at testing, and do you do any type of testing, and if so, how do you deal with that with them coming in?
Talk about one quick thing. Our HR group has done a really great job. We hire about 5,000 part-time workers that work on game day and other events that we have here. And we realize there's some difficulty for folks to come in and even apply and, online, or they don't have access to computers, or they can't fill out an application really well. And so we've had hiring events, and we come in and using technology, we record them. If they do have a smartphone, they can use that. If they don't, they can come to our hiring events. And different managers throughout our business can watch them, can see them, can see if they have a smile on their face. So even if they're not good test takers or whatever the case may be, we've got an opportunity to either meet them in person or to have them within our system answering questions, sort of face-to-face via technology. And that's been really helpful for us.
Great.
Bill, I will say this. Tests have their place. Everybody's hiring for something. You have to know, look, if I'm IBM, your score on the SAT, your score on exams, that matters. If I'm in a different line of work, potentially, CHICK-FIL-A, a smile, those things also matter. Not to say we don't want competent people, not to say we don't have them. We have plenty of them in spades. But in different jobs, different skills are required. And so I think we just have to be mindful of that and slot people where they are.
Great. Thank you. Well, I believe we're pretty much out of time. But the kind of a last question that I would throw out to the panel is, you know, we have a lot of either legislators or practitioners in the audience. You shared a lot of, you know, great ideas and things that your organizations are doing. Anything else that you would offer up as recommendations to those who are in attendance of things that they could consider as they are challenged by finding good labor and finding people to bring into their organizations?
I would just go back to maybe something I mentioned before on giving people a second chance. We've all done things in our past that we wish we hadn't, and for some folks, that's put them in a position where they have criminal records. Let's don't make that a hurdle where people can't get over because of that.
I'd say just to engage. You know, I was asked the other day, why can't our school system do this, this, and this? And I said, when's the last time you sat down with your school board member and told them that this was a need of your business? They never had that discussion. So I'd encourage these men and women here that are passionate about these issues to engage with the school boards, engage with your local partners, and offer up those ideas and help just drive it. But I do think there's only so much you can accomplish at the state level. It's really got to happen at the local level.
I would say that be engaged, but as you are engaged, be mindful of two things. One, skill development, and we need to make sure that we provide the type of skills that will be necessary, not just for today, but for tomorrow, and the type of skills that will be necessary, not for jobs that we want people to have, but for jobs that we know are head of household wage type jobs, so that they can have a livable wage. Because too often we say, we want to train you for a job I don't want to take, I don't want to have, but I'm not training you for a job that we all would want to have and is livable and that they actually can move the needle. And communities, consequently, can move the needle on as well.
Great. Well, Rodney, Greg, Chris, I can't thank you enough for the time you've spent with us. If you would please join me in thanking the panel.